Hi, this is Tash, and you're listening to Season 2 of the Imperfect Activist podcast, coming at you via the Be the Change Media Network. The Imperfect Activist is a space where I, a young activist, talk to other youth activists about the ways they're trying to make the world a better place, and using their creativity to tackle the injustices facing our generation, whilst also just trying to survive and thrive on a planet that's, well, quite literally on fire. In this episode of The Imperfect Activist, I talked to May Puckey. May is an 18-year-old climate activist who first became involved in the environmental movement during primary school, and she regularly attended Fridays for Future events in Exeter. When May was 11, she learnt about the catastrophic environmental impact of flying, and since then, she's decided not to fly. She mainly campaigns for systemic change and participates in numerous environmental groups and events in the UK, and writes articles on different green issues for monthly various publications. We talk about why she's decided to be completely flight-free and the impact this has on her as a young person growing up in the UK today.
We don't need 100 perfect activists, but millions of imperfect ones.
Young people, well, we're the future. We've got everything to fight for.
Well, to start us off then, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got involved in climate activism? If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I'm May, and I started climate activism from quite a young age, partially thanks to you, Tash. So I think I was in year 5 or 6, so I must have been about 10 or 11, and it was 2019, and I heard for the first time about Greta Thunberg and the fact there was a climate crisis. Before that, I'd obviously heard of the concept of climate change, but it always seemed like a very foreign concept to me, like quite an alien scientific principle. But then seeing people my age protesting about it and being so passionate about it made me passionate about it as well, and quite anxious about it as well, to be honest. And then when Fridays for Future, the youth climate protesting movement, came to Devon and came to Exeter, that's when I went from feeling disillusioned and anxious to a lot more motivated. I went to their first ever strike, which was back in 2019, I think. Yeah. And I was a regular at their strikes. I think people liked me there because I was this like tiny little overconfident gobby 11-year-old in a blue duffel coat with my little banners, which my nan made for me. I didn't fully understand what the slogans meant at the time, but yeah. And then from that, I just kind of grew my passion of environmental campaigning. I write for several local papers about climate change. I try and balance individual action with demanding systemic action, and I think mainly the topic of today's podcast is the fact I've been flight-free since I was in year 6.
Yes. Thanks, May. Yeah, I really wanted to get you on because I really, wanted to chat to you a bit because I've seen all the wonderful stuff you do with the flight-free movement, and yeah, being flight-free is something I've been for a few years, actually. Not necessarily fully consciously. I've just tried to avoid it. And I went after a couple of years after uni. I went on a big solo interrail trip around Europe and just fell in love with trains and realised that don't necessarily need to fly everywhere, do we? And I think because I was so involved in climate activism too, and grew up in the youth strike movement where I met you, and it's always felt kind of obvious to me to try and avoid flying as much as possible. But tell us a bit about how you're involved in the flight free movement, and for anyone who's never heard of it, what is it and why did you get involved initially?
So I think I got involved initially because my mum spoke about it a lot. Quite a lot of early climate activism for me came through my mum, because she was the one that alerted me to the issue of the climate crisis and spoke about it quite a lot. At my family, with my family, we have very lively kind of dinner discussions on politics and societal issues. And I remember back when I was in primary school, my mum talking about climate change a lot. And then she started speaking about Flight Free UK, who are a charity pressure group sort of thing, I guess, that have quite a big social media following, and they do a lot of raising awareness about the disastrous impact of flying, which the IPCC named in their, I think it was the 2019 report. It was the big one that generated all the kind of response from young people about the climate crisis. They named it as the worst individual action and someone could do for their carbon footprint, followed by eating meat, and then followed by buying fast fashion. So I remember my mum telling me this stat and finding it kind of crazy, because it had been something I'd never even considered before. You know, in England, lots of people fly, being an island. I'd never thought it could be bad in any way before. And then I started following Flight Free UK on social media, and I really liked the style of their campaigning tactics, how empowering they are, because they're great at raising awareness about the issues, but not just doing that, also empowering people and providing generally useful information about how to travel without flying. Also, they sometimes post like discounts and that kind of thing, and little money saving hacks to make it more affordable for people. So I just liked their hands-on way of engaging with people, I guess, and that inspired me to become Flight Free.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I always see that stuff on socials, and it's so cool to see just like breaking down some of like the myths around it as well, right? Like just like how I don't think people realize how bad flying is.
Yeah, so I actually wrote an article about this about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that's available online on West Country Voices if you want to read more. But I think I said before that it's the worst action an individual can take, followed by eating meat. But even then, it's quite a big jump ahead from eating meat, if that makes sense. So I found out when researching for this article that one flight to Mumbai in India from the UK, from London, is the equivalent of eating red meat every day for a year. So I think that puts into perspective, like compared to other things which are known as being bad for the environment, like eating meat, flying is like a really big issue. When you're looking at the stats of how much the aviation industry contributes to global carbon emissions, it doesn't appear much at only 2%, but that doesn't include the fact that 2/3 of the emissions that the aviation industry emits are other warming gases that aren't CO2, like nitrous oxide, which means that in reality, the aviation industry contributes to 3.5% of global heating emissions. And even then, that doesn't seem like much in comparison to other industries like the motor industry. But when you consider that only 10% of people globally fly annually, that's actually a lot, because 10% of people are responsible for 3.5% of emissions, which is quite drastic given most people drive or get in a car, and a minority of people fly, yet they contribute so much to our overall global annual emissions.
Yeah, that's so well explained. Thank you for sharing some stats in there, because yeah, it can be so confusing, and like you don't know really anything you're doing is like making an impact, and it's so important to think about that 10%, you know, those are the people that are, you know, causing the most damage. And if you think about those people, they're probably not people like us, are they, largely?
So in recent years I've realised that maybe less people fly than I thought. Like my boyfriend has never flown before, who I've been with for 3 years, and last year we went on the train together to France, and that was his first foreign holiday. And I met a friend recently who'd only just flown for the first time. But yeah, to me growing up, I don't know, lots of my best friends, understandably, they'd fly a lot to see their family. So I just couldn't imagine a world where people didn't fly, and I didn't realise that such a small proportion of people actually fly regularly.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know a bit more. Like, you say, you know, you see what your friends do and things like that. But yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about, because you're quite vocal on being flight free online and, you know, write such brilliant articles, like the impact that, how do you, the way you talk to other people about it, because flying can be quite a personal topic because it kind of connects people to holidays, like you say, people seeing family and, you know, just sense of freedom, really, right? It's a privilege to be able to fly cross borders and things like that. And yeah, I mean, talking about articles, I recently read one about a mum that takes her child on like loads of like weekend holidays in Europe, like flying, because it takes like a couple of hours or whatnot on the plane, and she can get really cheap plane tickets. And she's like, you know, low income household, probably working class mum, and you know, and that's something that was an article someone close to me actually sent me and was like, have you thought about this part of this conversation, like knowing that I tried to be flight free and things like that. So for many people, especially those on lower incomes, flying can feel like the only affordable way to travel or have a break. So how do you have conversations about reducing flying in a way that kind of recognises those realities for people?
Yeah, it definitely can be challenging, both when considering the cost effectiveness and when considering personal relationships with people. As I said, I've got quite a few friends who've got relatives abroad, and a bit of a disclaimer is, you know, I have no immediate family that live abroad, and I do expect maybe the picture would be different if I did, or if I was bilingual. So I'm never going to expect anyone to fully change their lifestyle, because I appreciate to lots of people it appears a drastic thing, but I'm especially not going to expect people who've got relatives abroad or maybe bilingual to not travel back to see their relatives or their country. And that has been challenging at times. One of my best friends is half Norwegian, and the time I was most torn about whether to fly or not probably was a few years ago when she was 15. She had this quite big coming of age ceremony in Norway. I think that's quite typical of Norwegian culture. It was very like traditional attire, traditional Norwegian celebration. And me and her have been close friends since we were 5. So she invited me with her for the weekend to come to this as her kind of close friend from the UK, to meet her Norwegian family. I had met them before when they were in the UK, but to properly stay with them. And I looked into if there was a way of me going flight free, but unfortunately there wasn't, because it was just a random weekend in the middle of term time. You know, going flight free to Norway would take time and planning. So there was no way I could get there. And I had conversations with family and multiple friends saying, do you think I should go or not? I feel really harsh. I'm not going. I don't want her to feel guilty that like she's flying if I'm saying that my reason for not going is flying because of the environmental impact. And I had mixed reactions from friends and family, to be honest. Some didn't understand what the problem was. They encouraged me to go. Others were telling me I should be principled and like stick to my grounding principles and not go. And eventually it was a very difficult decision, but I decided not to go. And I tried to tell her in an empathetic way and make sure we could do something celebratory in the UK. I can't remember what we did now, but we did do something. I think I knitted her a hat, which was a bit random, but I like knitting things for people who are special to me. So I think I did that, and I made sure to stay in touch, and I made sure to like emphasize that obviously it was like an amazing thing for her, and most of my family live in Norway, so it wasn't like I was being critical of her decision to fly there. Just for me personally, I feel like I just would have felt so guilty knowing the impacts and going for such a short amount of time. Like, it was only for a weekend. I wouldn't have had time to properly engage or immerse myself in the culture there. I felt like it wasn't worth it, given how detrimental the impacts would be to the environment. I might have considered it more if it was like a 2-week long thing and I could have got the train, or at least I would have had quality time there. But it was literally a kind of like fly there, spend a night or two there, fly back. And I just thought,
yeah,
I'd feel too guilty, a bit like you were saying about the mum who went away regularly with her daughter. I'd feel too guilty going for such a short haul flight to visit. But yeah, I do think it's really challenging, the cost effectiveness. I mean, I'm only 18, and currently when I've got the Eurostar, I've had the pleasure and privilege of going with family. So they have generously paid as a family for our Eurostar tickets. But next year I'm taking a gap year and I'm looking into going interrailing, and some of my friends are going travelling as well, but they're flying because it's cheaper. And being on a student budget and working a minimum wage job, it is tempting sometimes to fly. And I do definitely see that from a cost effective point of view. It is one of the major downsides, I'd say, of not flying. But I think ultimately it means that you might go away less regularly, like not as regularly as the mum who goes away with her daughter for lots of weekends around Europe that you were talking about. But it means that when you do go, you appreciate it more, and you make sure, given you're spending more to get the train or whatever, you make sure you're properly enriching yourself and spending a decent amount of time there, so it feels worth it. And although the cost effectiveness is an issue, it is often cheaper to fly. It is worth bearing in mind that the Eurostar do some good discounts, so you can get Eurostar tickets to Amsterdam, where I got the train to last week with family and friends. You can get a ticket from London to Amsterdam for as low as £39. They're not often that cheap, but you can get them that cheap. Actually, since I went to Amsterdam, they've just banned flying adverts from the city because of how fossil fuel intensive it is. So I feel like I made a bit of an impact on my Amsterdam debut. They obviously saw
I bet you did that, May.
And they were like, oh, better stop those adverts. But
they saw you coming on the Eurostar. They were like, oh.
Exactly. Yeah, it is going to be a bit of a challenge budgeting an interrail trip, I'd say. But I also think that leads to one of my main points with flying, is that I never want people to feel guilty if they do fly. I want them to consider the impact and question maybe how worthwhile their trip is given the impact. But I think the whole system is flawed in the fact that it's cheaper to take a much more polluting option and far much more expensive generally to take a much more sustainable option. So I feel like generally it's a systematic issue with the aviation industry rather than individuals' faults. It is obviously good if you can be like me and you can stop flying, and it's good if you can just cut down a couple of trips a year because you realise the impact. But I think generally we need to address people at the top rather than making people feel guilty for their personal habits.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely. I'm with you. Give the girl a microphone. I think, that's really interesting as well, because I was going to ask you, like, how you felt, as a young person, kind of making that decision, and, kind of how your friends and family think, what they think about it. And that's really interesting. I think, I had a similar situation recently with, my mum went to Venice. She flew to Venice for a few days, and I mean, I could have hopped on a flight and joined her for the weekend when I wasn't working, but I just thought personally, I was like, I don't need to do that. I can plan another time to go, and like I say, I think really recommend interrailing for you for your gap year, because I had the best time interrailing a couple of years ago. And again, like, talking about cost effectiveness, like, I bought one interrail ticket which lasted me 2 months, and I went to 10 different countries, I think about 20-30 different places across Europe in 2 months, and using one ticket basically to get to each country, and within the country basically go on any train pretty much in Europe with this ticket. And I just thought that was just like crazy. Like, that was amazing. Like, it was so brilliant. And yeah, cost effective wise, absolutely, like really worked out. Like yeah, so I think it's that balance, isn't it? But yeah, and you're totally right about thinking about like individual action and like compared to like, yeah, I mean, there needs to be a system change, doesn't there? And yeah, you know, and yeah, I guess on that line though, I guess the big question in the room is, I'd love to know your thoughts if you were to like think, if people are listening and thinking about trying to be a bit more flight free, yeah, like how would you encourage them to do so?
Well, bearing in mind the stats I shared earlier about how much worse flying is than other individual actions, like I think I said this stat earlier, but one flight to Mumbai is supposedly the equivalent of eating red meat every day for a year. When bearing in mind that kind of thing, I think it does show the amount of CO2 and other emissions you can reduce by choosing to be flight free. But I think the reality is not everyone's going to choose to be flight free. And part of that is for valid reasons. Like I said earlier, if you have family abroad, immediate friends abroad, but not just that. If, for example, medical treatment or something like that is only available abroad, or your best friend's getting married abroad, that sort of thing, things do come up in the way, which is why I really like Flight Free UK and why I find them really engaging. So every year since, I think I was 11. So, so like 8-9 years now, I've been flight free since year 6, my whole time at secondary school. And each year, around Christmas time, I sign the Flight Free UK pledge, where you get a little poster and you can share with them why you've gone flight free, read other people's pledges. But when you download one of their like generic pledges, there's the opportunity, which I always do, to say you're totally flight free for that year. But there's also the opportunity to say you're flight free for leisure. And I think that's a really helpful way of doing it, because it doesn't put shame on people who might have to fly for kind of extenuating circumstances, immediate family, medical treatment, that kind of thing. And there's also ones you can download that say like, I pledge to reduce my flights. So I don't think it has to be all or nothing for sure. Just the reason I decided to go kind of all out, I guess, was because for me, I felt like a bit of a hypocrite having no massive motive to fly, given I've got no close family abroad. I do have family abroad. I have family in China actually, but they're not immediate family, and they come to the UK quite a lot. So luckily, like it's not like I have to visit them, you know, because I'm seeing them in a couple of weeks actually, which will be nice. So for me, being someone that has no immediate friends or family abroad, I felt like the only flying I was doing, but it was for leisure. And I felt like something like a holiday wouldn't feel like a benefit to me, because even if it was personally benefiting me, it was causing harm to the ecosystem and other people. As I said earlier when I shared some stats, in quite a big way, you know, it's the IPCC have constantly spoke about in their reports how detrimental it is compared to other forms of individual action. So yeah, that for me was why I decided to be flight free. I feel like, excuse the pun, I'd feel more grounded if I didn't, because I feel like if I did fly, I'd feel guilty knowing the impacts when I didn't have much reason to fly.
Yeah, no, I feel completely similar, and I think the flight free pledge is really cool as well. I've done it for a few years too, and it's just feels really accessible and really friendly and really like, just a great initiative, I think, and really a practical thing to do. So yeah, if people are listening, they can do that.
Another reason why I kind of adopted not flying as like a key part of how I make an individual difference to the environmental movement, bearing in mind what I said earlier about there may be bigger need for systematic change, was because I tried other forms of individual action and they hadn't properly worked for me. For example, I was veggie and at times vegan for several years. And then about 2 years ago, I got pneumonia. I was ill for several weeks and I was in hospital, but not for very long. I was just in hospital for like a day. But when I was there, they took my bloods and they told me I was like very iron deficient and stuff, which was something I knew already, but I just tried to mitigate by taking iron tablets and things. But then when I got ill, it just became apparent that it really wasn't working and I had to eat some meat, which is something I felt guilty about for a while. But then I thought, oh, well, that is other action I can take and I can continue to demand systematic change, which I guess is my message to people who might have to fly for seeing close relatives, for seeing close friends, for medical reasons. Even though I have been saying how much of a big issue it is, there's always other forms of action you can take which might work better for you.
Yeah, and I think this is such the ethos of why I created this podcast too, right? Like, rein it back full circle, thanks, May. The Imperfect Activist. It's about like, we can't do everything and be this perfect activists because that's just, we're human, right? That's just not realistic. So yeah, it's great to hear a bit about your story and the choices you choose to make. And I think it's really reassuring to hear, the realities that you face as a young person in doing that. I'd love to flip the conversation a bit and just like bring it to a close a bit by talking a bit about some of the things you love about flight free travel. And like, I'm talking to you after you just got back from Holland, aren't I? Which is really exciting. How was it? How was your experience being flight free last week? And what do you love about sustainable travel?
Yeah, I think what's really nice is, I think I touched upon this earlier, but if you're having to think more consciously about how and when you travel, it gives you the opportunity to appreciate where you are more potentially, because it doesn't feel like a spontaneous, casual thing. Being that bit more slow and slightly more expensive in lots of cases, you do have to kind of plan it out more, and therefore when you get there, you're likely to want to stay longer and appreciate it more. So yeah, I had a great time in Amsterdam last week. It was my first time in Holland. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful country, very cool city, particularly since they banned the flying adverts. And I was there for 5 nights. I went both ways via Eurostar. And I went with my grandparents and my dad, but I met some of my friends in the evenings because I had friends who were on holiday there at the same time. And it was also positive because I did have a friend who flew over there. And like I said, I never want to judge people personally for their decisions to fly there. And she just asked me, like, how come I got the train? And even though I never want to judge people personally, I also want to be true to my principles and explain to them why I've chosen to be flight free. So I said to her in like a non-confrontational, chilled out way why I decided to be flight free. And then afterwards, she messaged me when we were like checking everyone got back okay. She messaged me saying that even though she wasn't sure if she'd go fully flight free, hearing what I had to say was something she hadn't heard of before, and she was going to look into it and consider getting the train next time. And I guess that's what my aim is. It's having like proper filling conversations with people and making them consider their actions rather than trying to lecture people and tell them like, oh, no one can fly, because it is a systematic issue. Flights are way too cheap given the environmental damage they cause, which is why it needs to be a conversation and action needs to be addressed to people at the top.
Absolutely. Well, that just sounds like you're fully like living by example as well, right? Like, people are just naturally going to ask you about it, right? And I found that when I did a bit of interrailing, like just talking to other people about, oh, how did you get here? Like, you know, like hostels are the best place to meet people and talk about traveling and things. A lot of people asking me about why I didn't just, you know, fly over from the UK to, Central Europe. And it's like, it was really interesting to have those conversations, isn't it? And because I think just making people think a bit, isn't it? It's really great, and especially young people. I think it's great to. I think more young people are just quite switched on to these things as naturally as we feel more and more the effects of climate breakdown and climate anxiety. I mean, I think with like the generation before us, you know, we're feeling like anxious about the climate crisis. So it's great to do that. I like to always ask people about hope to kind of finish off, because I think, you know, activism, no matter what you're doing within kind of the climate space or the social justice space, can feel exhausting, especially in today's world, especially as a young person. So I'd love to ask you, May, is there anything right at the moment that's bringing you a lot of hope and joy, and keeping you going?
Oh, well, it's the fact that now it's having conversations with people like you and meeting other people that I can have these sort of fulfilling conversations with about kind of social justice issues and environmental issues. I'm very much a social people person, and I love having chats to people about things I'm passionate about and debates. So that always brings me hope, meeting like-minded people, but also meeting people who might have different opinions from me and having that discussion and learning from each other a bit. I'm also getting a lot of hope from being outside in nature a lot recently. I've just started a new job doing gardening, and it's been, although the heat wave probably is caused by climate change, or at least made worse by climate change. It has been nice the last few weeks being out in the sun, doing the gardening, seeing all the little plants grow. I've had a few wilt in the temperature, but they do always bring me hope. Watching them grow, coming in and out each day, and seeing the sunflowers are like those 5 centimeters taller, or like the courgettes in the garden, they're looking a little bit riper. It's those kind of things which, in my kind of granny gardening hobby era, bring me through. The final thing I'll say about the advantage of going flight free, sorry, this literally just popped into my head, is when you're on the train, you get to go through other countries, which I think is pretty cool. Like, you don't have to stop off in them, but you just get to go through and you get to see all the landscape being on the ground. It's nice and reflective. So, like, the other day, you know, my boyfriend's just chilling out at home. I was in 4 countries in one day when I went to Amsterdam. I was in England, then I was in France, then I was in Belgium. We actually had to stop in Brussels for a bit, whilst there was an issue with the train, but that was fine. Got to see a bit of Brussels, and then I was in the Netherlands. So that's another advantage. It might seem counterintuitive, and you might have to limit the amount of times you go abroad, but when you do, you feel fully present, I'd say, traveling more slowly and more sustainably.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a great way to end on, because the beauty of it as well, right? Like, the beauty of seeing the world go past in the window is what's not to love about that. And and love that you're you know, finding lots of joy doing your gardening as well, because that's I love the kind of slowness of like gardening and things. It really brings you back to, like, you know, nature's there, she's got us, we've got her, you know, we're in this together. And that's wonderful. Amazing. Thank you so much, May.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a fun and interesting conversation.
You're always welcome back.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Imperfect Activist. I hope you enjoyed our chats. If you got this far, please give us a like and a download on whatever platform you're on. And you can follow us over on Instagram at The Imperfect Activist and at Be The Change Media across all social media platforms. I've been Tash, a youth climate justice activist and creative, a teenage youth striker turned NGO worker from Devon. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you'll join us in becoming an imperfect activist too. The world needs you. Till next time.